Welcome to the larger brother of the 4-16 Midas Tac HD in this 6-24 by 50 form. I've already done a more in-depth unboxing and physical overview of that scope, so if you're curious to see more about this optic, go check out that video. Probably link it in the description, or maybe I'll even forget. As far as the overall setup of this optic as opposed to the 4-16, it is basically identical, with the exception that it's a little bit longer, a little bit heavier, and has obviously more magnification. But all of the controls are the same, which means that it is very, very impressive for the $400-ish that you could find these for right now. I still believe it needs a throw lever, but the side parallax is excellent. The elevation turret is non-locking, but has a very good zero stop and wonderful sounding and feeling detents, and the windage is capped. Comparing it to the 4-16, you could see exactly how similar these scopes are, with the exception of just the size. I love the 4-16 Midas Tac HD. In fact, I love it so much, I swapped out my beloved SWFA Fix 10X on my 452CZ in 22LR, primarily because I wanted to use it for varmint hunting, and the 4-16 is a much better package than a Fix 10X. As far as the weight, just about 26.8 ounces on my scale, which is pretty light all things considered. As far as reticle options, you have three to choose from for this magnification range. You have the APRS2, 3, and APLR4 in MOA. The 2 is the same one that's in the 4-16, which is a very simple milling reticle. The 3, as seen here, is a Christmas tree style mill reticle, and the 4 is another Christmas tree style reticle in MOA. Now, this optic does not offer illumination for the reticle. Instead, it only offers a first focal plane reticle, which I feel looks fantastic, whether it's the 2 or the 3, and even the 4 looks really good on paper. If you're looking for illumination, you're going to have to shop elsewhere. There's a ton to choose from the Athlon library, so have at it. But if you're looking for a very simple, bare bones, more or less precision style optic, something like this is going to be set up for that while still not breaking the bank. To the viewer paying attention to what's on the screen, you can see that I've been shifting my camera behind the scope to eliminate all the shadows at 24x. Unfortunately, they were apparent and I couldn't really get rid of them 100%. But we're going to see if that's going to play a role in how well this thing performs later on. I didn't set up the zero stop, or else it would have had a nice hard click basically wherever you want it. These turrets sound and feel so good that I don't mind that they're not locking. They're really, really good for the money. Athlon Midas Tac 6-24. We are at maximum magnification. We're going to back it out so we can see how the reticle lines up to the rest of the target. In fact, we're going to go all the way to minimum, then back up to maximum and see that the reticle does not shift on the target, which is great. Adjusting the side parallax, however, you can see it's got some real wonky distortion going on. Fisheye, barrel distortion, it's got a little bit of everything. It's really, really, really trippy. Anyway, once we get it exactly where we want it, it's actually a little bit hard to do because how small the side focus is on this thing. At least at max magnification, if we dial it back, it's a little bit more forgiving, but not by a significant amount. However, I am going to leave it at an indicated 20x so we could see more of the reticle and the target. With all that being said, let's start this thing. Wow, that's impressive. Just like the 4-16 that I reviewed, this thing is so far impressive. Let's reset the windage and go up. Windage reset's pretty good. 12 o'clock, reticle doesn't look like it lines up that well, but the rest of it at 6 o'clock still looks pretty good. Wow, so perfect. Absolutely perfect elevation gain. However, the reticle at 12 o'clock still is slightly canted, but the rest of it looks like it's squared up really, really well. The 12 o'clock position doesn't matter anywhere near as much, but it would still be nice to see that lined up. Let's return back to 0 and see what it looks like. Looks pretty good. Let's go back up. Excellent. Excellent. Let's check for slop to the windage. Excellent. And then slop for the elevation. Very, very good. It tracks really well. So did the 4-16. I've already done repeated testing on the 4-16 on my CZ452 out to about 300 yards, constantly dialing the elevation for every shot between 50 and 300 yards, and it always seems to reset perfectly fine. So I'm very confident with turrets and the erector systems on these scopes. As far as our field of view at minimum magnification, Athlon claims 17.8 feet at 100 yards at the minimum, which is pretty narrow. All things considered, this is a fairly high magnified optic. You know, if we were to look at a similarly spec'd 5-25 from, like, let's say Discovery Optics, the PRS2, that one's got 24.5 feet at the minimum versus 17.8. So if you're looking for a scope that's going to give you a little bit more dynamicism, if that's even a word, but a little bit more of a swing as far as your overall distances that you could shoot at effectively, just be mindful that 6x is pretty big. It's pretty severe. 24x, though, is a good standard, especially for anything long range or precision shooting. Again, like that 5-25 from Discovery Optics, if we were to look at these two side by side, at least numbers wise, they're about the same. The DO has a massive view looking through it, whereas this is a little bit more on the average to slightly below average side. However, the optics on this scope are quite good. Sharp, clear, and crisp. You did see already that when I adjusted the side parallax on the tracking test, yeah, it seemed to distort pretty wildly, but we're at a pretty close distance. And as long as we had the side parallax set properly, everything looked to be pretty squared up and pretty good. As far as how close we could really adjust the side parallax on this thing, this tree's about 10-ish yards away, and I'm able to get a pretty good image out of this thing and still be able to pull it back even closer. So if you're doing a lot of close range shooting, the side parallax is more than capable. But as you just saw probably, as I'm adjusting the side parallax, the image distorts pulling at the center. Something to note. Again, once we have it basically set to where we need it, I don't really see any sort of distortion issues or things that are noteworthy. Just note that when you are dialing your side parallax in with the scope, it's going to look a little funky until you get it just right. Low light performance, I feel, is kind of important on every optic, so it's only fair to test this thing out. Granted, when I filmed this at the end of last summer, there was still a very heavy canopy, so very dark shadows. Pulling the camera away from the scope, you can see that we see a fair amount of details down there. You can see the target on the tree, you can see the tree itself and some of the bushes around it. Pulling back behind the scope, you can see at 6x, we have a lot of those same features that we were just looking at. Now, I do not know the exit pupil size, but I can say it's a little bit on the tighter side. As you already saw when we were setting up the reticle, at 24x it gets really, really touchy, at least in darker environments. And like this is no exception. It's really hard to be able to look through this thing effectively at maximum magnification in darker environments because I feel like the exit pupil is on the tighter side, which I'm going to illustrate right now. Shifting the camera ever so slightly brings those shadows up and in instantaneously. This thing at 24x and anything other than crystal clear, beautiful blue skies, bright sun is going to hit the shadows really, really fast. So the exit pupil on this thing is really not that forgiving. And as a result of that, the Eyebox suffers a little bit. But we're going to take a look at that very soon. Moving on to the extended range portion, we have solar panels at, I believe, 360-ish, 500-ish, and 1,000-ish yards. Very overcast day, but decent enough amount of light, so we'll see how well that's going to play into this thing's tiny exit pupil 24x. But here at 6x, at this 350-ish yard solar panel, I can't really fault this thing too much. Edge-to-edge sharpness looks very good, and so does the depth of field. But as we slowly increase our magnification, with the side parallax set roughly to where it needs to be, everything lines up perfectly. And there's very little to no purple fringing or chromatic aberration that I see. Adjusting the side parallax, though, will pop up a bit of a pinkish greenish hue, depending on if you're too far in or too close out, or did I say that right, or is that backwards? Either which way, once you get the side parallax set just right, a lot of it disappears, and you're left with a very good looking image. 24x here looks really good, but I back out the magnification to 20x, and it looks at least as good as it did at 24. Again, when the lighting is halfway decent, this thing performs quite good. Focusing on our 500-yard solar panel at lower magnification, I think it was around 10x, and bring it up to its maximum, you can see we have a little bit of purple fringing, but again, we haven't really tweaked the side parallax at all. Beyond that, though, edge-to-edge sharpness is very good, as is depth of field. There's about 400 yards between those wires that you see, the power cables. Adjusting the side parallax a little bit yields a slightly better result as far as parallax goes, but we're basically pegged at infinity at this point. No real complaints with the image at that distance. And even out at 1,000 yards, this thing looks really, really good. Again, the depth of field is very deep, very nice. A lot of people like a large depth of field. Some people prefer a much smaller depth of field. It just depends on your personal preference. For me, it can go either which way. But on a target scope like this, it's nice to just be able to set your side parallax and go from one target to the next, to the next, to the next. But some people prefer having a really shallow depth of field, so this way they're focusing solely on their target and nothing else. Bringing up the elevation 10 full mils, and you can see the limits of this thing's eyebox. It is very tight because those shadows creep up very fast and very aggressively. We can shift the camera down to compensate. However, you can see just how shifted the view through the scope is in the actual scope body. There's nothing you could really do for this, with the exception of maybe running a canted mount and splitting the difference. But if you're going to be dialing for a lot of elevation, it's going to be something that you notice. However, when you do compensate for the shift of the exit pupil, and you do set the side parallax back to where it needs to be, you're still left with a pretty good image at 10 mils, but it definitely suffers. It's definitely more annoying than it has to be, given this overall setup is designed to be adjusted with the elevation quite frequently. Let's bring it back to 0 mils of added elevation, so you could see that the shadows creep up at the 12 o'clock position. I once again have to adjust where my camera position is to look through it properly. And again, I have to dance around with those shadows because they creep up so fast. It's annoying. It's the only really frustrating thing about this scope is how much the exit pupil shifts, and thus the eyebox shifts. Out at around 2,000 yards, though, 0 mils of added elevation, optics on this thing are very clear and sharp. I wish they were like this even with 20 mils of added elevation, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Once again, showing you how tight the exit pupil is on this thing at 24x, I'm shifting the camera side to side. Those shadows creep up so fast. But if we were to look at a positive, at least the image stability, the reticle sharpness, and the image sharpness are very, very good. But you still can't really see through the shadows, which sucks. Leaving it off to the extreme and backing out the magnification to roughly 20x, you can see that a lot of the shadows go away. However, it's still on the tighter side, especially compared to a lot of other 5 to 25 optics that just perform better in this role. It's as simple as that. Backing down the magnification once again to 14x, you could see when we're at the extremes at 20, it does get better, but it's still a little bit on the tighter side. If you have a very solid cheek weld and you're shooting in a very rigid position, this shouldn't be much of an issue for you. But if you plan on doing any sort of field work, it's not going to be my first choice. From there, we're going to drop it down to the minimum magnification of 6x. You could still see the shadows off to the side. So even though we're at the minimum magnification for this thing, those shadows creep up a lot faster than they do on a lot of other style optics. Overall, it's not a stellar performance. Again, though, if we're looking at some sort of positives from this, at least the image stability is extremely high. As far as what this looks like in a more dynamic roll, at 6x here at our 81-yard paper target, forward to back, fore and aft, eye relief is pretty good. But the second you go off center, everything starts to get crazy. And as we increase the magnification to around 10x, you can see just how much tighter it gets. It's perplexingly tight. It shouldn't be this tight. We're going to continue to increase the magnification until we get to its maximum, where you will see that it's basically unusable to get behind. Touching back on what we talked about already, we have a nice clear sunny day, a good looking target that's very easy to pick up at 81 yards, and you can see that I'm having a very difficult time trying to get behind this scope at this magnification. It is by far and away the biggest weakness of this scope overall. So you want more from an optic, but you don't mind paying a little bit extra. The Vortex Strike Eagle is going to be the first comparison. This is a 5 to 25 by 56 millimeter scope. It's going to be about twice the price as the Midas. Lengthwise, they're both identical. Weight-wise, the Vortex is going to be about 3.5 to 4 ounces heavier, but you have a much larger field of view, 24 to 5.2 feet versus 17.8 to 4.6. Eye relief is roughly the same at 3.6 to 3.7 inches. Now, there's a lot to talk about these two difference-wise. The Strike Eagle has illumination, it's got locking turrets, it has basically a non-shifting eyebox when you're dialing for elevation, but I would have to give the Midas the edge when it comes to overall image sharpness, but not by a significant margin. The biggest thing is going to be the price difference. $400 is a lot of money. It's basically twice the price for the Strike Eagle as it is the Midas. But if you're looking for a scope that's going to offer you more than the Midas, something like the Strike Eagle should be pretty high on your list. I don't know if the tariffs are going to really play an issue with the importing of all of these optics and what the price point's going to be. But if you could find a Strike Eagle 5 to 25, I'd actually say it's a pretty good deal, even around $800. Now, there are a lot of other options that are coming out. I actually have a Viper HD 5 to 25 coming to me. I bought one used for like $700. They're right around $1,000. They're made in the Philippines, and they offer a lot of what the Strike Eagle offers, but it should be even better than this for honestly not that much more money. But the Viper HD would be almost 3 times the price of the Midas, so that's something to take into consideration. Again, the Strike Eagle I think is a better overall package. It is twice the price. It's going to be whether or not you want to or can even afford that. But if you're looking for straight up cleanest optics, the Midas is really hard to beat. Unless you start dialing for elevation, in which case you already see how that can go. The Strike Eagle is a little bit more stable when it comes to dialing for elevation at distance, but I'd still probably have to give it to the Midas. The Strike Eagle has a much larger view looking through it, as you can very clearly tell, and a much smaller scope profile. It's actually quite impressive to get behind. There isn't a whole lot else to say. Both of these are pretty solid optics, even at their individual price points. Reticle-wise, I'd say it's a bit of a toss-up as well. It depends on which is more your speed. I can go with either one, to be brutally honest. The biggest thing is going to be price point and illumination. I would have to say that's about it. But getting behind the Strike Eagle is pretty impressive with its large view looking through it. But the Midas is pretty impressive with how sharp the image is capable of getting when everything is in perfect alignment. So you don't want a Vortex product, but you still want some of the things that it offers. Look no further then, ladies and gentlemen, for the Bushnell Match Pro ED. This roughly $700 rifle scope is in 5 to 30 by 56 first focal plane form. It comes in almost an inch longer than the Athlon. It also comes in about 6 ounces heavier than the Athlon. The field of view is 24.5 to 4.1 versus 17.8 to 4.6. And eye relief is just about the same, but the MPED is actually 1/10 of an inch farther forward. Yet it still offers a giant view looking through it, a very nice looking reticle, illumination, locking turrets, the whole shebang. The MPED is one of those scopes that I've really had to not try to buy. if that makes any sense. My brief time with that scope was wonderful. I liked everything that it had to offer. I think it was a vast improvement over the XRS3, which is Bushnell's flagship rifle scope, but it comes in at a fraction of the price and just works so wonderfully. Again, I would give the image to the Midas. The MPED can produce a very good looking image, and for its $700 price point, I'd say it's actually a little bit above average. But that should just put it into perspective how good the Midas could actually look when, again, everything is in perfect order. Just like with the Strike Eagle, though, the MPED offers illumination and locking turrets, which again are not available on the Midas Tac HD. I would still give optics to the Midas, but the MPED is not that far behind. And the extra magnification, a whopping 6x at the top end, is definitely noticeable. When you are focusing on a target around 100 yards, it's not that big of a difference, but when you start pushing out beyond 200 to 300 yards like you see here, that extra 6x goes a long way, and so does illumination. Despite the fact that it's a very bright sunny day when I filmed with the MPED, the illumination is still visible under the heavy, thick canopy at 300 yards. That allows you to see where your reticle is, and it could be the difference between making your shot and missing it entirely. I really do miss the MPED. Maybe one day I'll just spend my money and have one just to keep on my shelf and to be reminded of how good some scopes can be. Our last comparison is going to be with this, the Meopta Optica 6 5-30 by 56. This first focal plane rifle scope, if you can find one available, can be had for around $1,000, about 2.5 times the price of the Midas. But the Optica 6 offers, in my opinion, one of the finest looking images of any HPVO I've ever reviewed. It also has the wonderful MRAD reticle. The only reason I do not own an Optica 6 5-30 is because it has one of the just laziest design features ever. It's got a wonderful locking elevation turret, but the windage is exposed and non-locking, and I can't accept it. If it was capped, I would love it. I would own it, and it would be on one of my rifles and probably never come off. Quite similar to the Optica 6 3-18 by 50 that I love so much. That's found its way onto my Tikka CTR, and I'm not too sure if I'm going to be pulling that off there anytime soon, if ever. But you never know what's going to be coming in stock tomorrow. With the exception of the absolutely retarded windage setup on the Optica 6, it absolutely beats the Midas optically. Beautiful, beautiful image coming through the Optica. No real shift to the Eyebox. No real chromatic aberration when I was filming with this thing. Controls-wise and touchpoint-wise, the Midas is pretty good, but the Optica 6 absolutely feels vastly superior in almost every way, shape, or form, despite how good a lot of the controls in the Midas feel. The Optica is a much nicer package. Again, there's only one reason why I don't own one, and that's just sheer either stupidity or just sheer negligence. It's one or the other, and neither of them are things that I enjoy. At 200 yards, you can really start noticing the difference between 24 and 30x. Both of these have very similar views looking through them and very similar amounts of scope body. So these are about as true to a direct comparison as you can really get. For the $1,000 that the Optica 6 costs, I really do feel that it is justifiable compared to the $400 Midas. If you can swing the extra cash. If you cannot, does the Midas compare to the Optica at all? Well, very clearly, I would say yes. The Optica is definitely a sharper looking image to the Midas, but the Midas I would give to the other comparisons we've already looked at. Ultimately, it's going to come down to whether or not you're willing to buy a Midas, even though it's not going to have illumination or a locking elevation. And if you're going to be doing more or less target shooting, well, you really aren't going to be really needing illumination or an elevation lock. For some people you will, but for the vast majority of you, I don't know if that's really going to be a deal breaker or not. I would think that the exit pupil and the Eyebox shift would be much more of a deal breaker than anything else. But between these two, it's definitely got to be the Optica, despite how stupid it is. Well, there's not much else to really say. I do feel that the scope fills a role in the market. If you're doing more or less bench shooting and you don't want to break the bank for having a scope that tracks really well, has really nice reticles and pretty good controls. I mean, the elevation turret is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And everything else is acceptable, especially for the $400-ish that this thing can be found for right now. The only negative I have is the very narrow eyebox and the small exit pupil. If that was increased just a little bit and you had a little bit more forgiving of an eyebox and you didn't have to worry about the image shifting when you're dialing for elevation, I really do feel that this would be a home run. $400 for a scope that works like this would be awesome. Really, really awesome. I just don't know if Athlon's going to invest more in this as opposed to what some of their Gen 3s are coming out right now, which actually they did send me a Gen 3 scope, which I plan on doing the unboxing to tonight. So hopefully I'll be able to get that review up and out pretty quickly, but my backlog is still extensive to say the least. Overall, I think you could do far worse than what this Midas has to offer for the price point. If you want more features, though, you're going to have to look elsewhere, but that's pretty self-explanatory. For anyone else that's looking to just get into an intermediate magnification scope and just learn the dynamics of shooting and dialing, look at the Midas Tac HD 4-16. I absolutely love that scope. It's got all the good features of this scope, but in a better overall package, and I haven't noticed any real image shifting issues or eyebox issues. Again, because it's only a 4-16, not a 6-24. If though you feel like you need a little bit more magnification, this is another option for you. But again, there's a lot of other fish in the sea, so hopefully you could find something that's going to fit your bill to the T. With all that being said, a huge thank you to the fan for sending this in. I love getting my hands on stuff that I normally wouldn't buy because it allows me to see what's out there on the market and hopefully bring it all to you in a long format video that you enjoy watching. So thank you very much to him, and thank you all very much for watching. As always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you can still help by using my affiliate links in the description below and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.